Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Perspective with me, Julie Ali. Always a pleasure being with you, and I do hope that you're going to enjoy something different on the show today. Normally, we stick with lifestyle matters, but this time around, we're delving into the world of politics. My guest today, and I'm very pleased to announce, is Hassen Lorgat. He's a social justice activist, and we're going to be looking at the political landscape, obviously involving the genocide in Israel, and particularly how mainstream media reports on the genocide. And we need to look closer to home as well. How does our media report on all of these issues locally and of course abroad as well? So do join me in welcoming a social justice activist. He's going to correct me, I know. He's going to talk about the media, but let's hand over to him. It is truly my pleasure to have on the show this morning social justice activist Hassen Lorgat. Assalamu alaikum to you, welcome.
Wa alaikum salam. There's no need to correct you because media is part of our milieu, you know. It's communications is important. It's a human right. Nowadays, you find poor communities, they demand bread, the right to rest and read, but also, importantly, they demand the right to good internet so that they can actually find out what's happening, because things have moved away from free TV and stuff like that, connectivity, electricity cuts. So there's a lot. So the right to communicate is actually integral to who we are. So you can find out where's the food queues, where's the rights office, where you can get jobs. It's an opener for other rights, you know. So yeah, there's nothing to correct.
I know your passion currently is social justice in the media, and rightly so. And that is why I said you may correct me, but thank you for being so generous. Let's talk about, before we even proceed further, who is Hassen Lorgat? Why is he occupying the space? And why is he so passionate about the issues that we're going to be unpacking on Perspective today, right here on Hilal Media, Hilal TV?
You know, for me, I must confess that I learned a lot of my craft, my politics, if you like, from the trade union movement. I know today when we look at the union, say, oh God, these guys, you know, they've lost the plot.
You're referring to SATU?
Before. SATU was my last union job.
Okay.
The first union job that I actually had, I was actually studying to become a teacher under apartheid. And I did not even the most revolutionary thing. I went to a meeting and got expelled for it. So I was out of teachers training college. So then I had to do part-time teaching and stuff like that. But while many of us, 12 of us, were expelled, some of them suffered certain depressions because you had a career path, etc. And then, you know, for us, I grew up in a poor space. I was in an orphanage, and I kind of had to grapple, you know, how do I make sense of this? And then we tried to democratize a trade union, a conservative union in the municipality. And then I started reading, of course, the big unions of COSATU, the formation of COSATU, you know, and then I took interest. Eventually, I got a job in the Metal and Allied Workers Union, which eventually merged with other unions to become MAU, to become NUMSA, sorry. So MAU was ours. So in that time, I have a lot of credit to give to organizers, Petros Peko, Baba K was from Swaziland, Bernie Fenneroff, I had mentioned he's a Jewish guy, the organizer. These were good people wanting to build organizational power.
And might I add here, we do know, we are aware, and we do say it out loudly, that not all Jews are Zionists, and we keep making that distinction. And I suppose that is exactly your thoughts as well.
In fact, we didn't even see, that may have been an inspiration for justice, because Jewish people have suffered a long time, whatever the motivations. But he was a left-wing guy, he's an astrophysicist. Moses Maiki, so that was the kind of, we were the young people there coming into the unions. But I remember that early unions used to talk about mandates and report backs. That when a leader goes to a meeting, that leader has to consult with the workers in a particular place to say, I'm going to talk about this, I'll tell you what happens. Because there's a lot of mistrust, disinformation, of course, in a time when internet wasn't there. But why this is important, it lays the basis for an understanding for an accountable democracy. That if you want to build an accountable democracy, you must be tied to your constituencies or your people. And you must take the mandate that they've given you and come back and report back. I remember when the political heat was going on in places in Indonesia where the UDF and others. I was in the audience. Tutu spoke in one of them. He says, oh, they keep telling you, where did you get your mandate? Where's your mandate? But there's a big talk in the early days of the emergence of the unions in the 80s onwards about mandates and democracy. And
where do we stand now? Excuse the interruption. When you talk about the unions in the early days and in the time of apartheid, when unions were being formed, and you make a comparison with our unions today, you talk about mandates, which is very, very important. Making that comparison, do you believe that our unions today are serving the masses?
I think there's a struggle inside the unions to revitalize. And I mean, you could see the change of culture. As it comes towards the democracy, the T-shirts were replaced by suits. The language of unions started changing. In fact, when we were in the unions growing up, we'd hear at the same time translations in the Sotho and Nguni languages. And as things got to the elections and the unions, COSATU and others started to play a role in the negotiating process, the language and the style of dress began to change. And with that, if you like, greater sponsorship into the unions, the idea that workers would fund their own struggle started to decline. And I think I raised these issues as an inspiration to why media sponsorship later years, as we may talk about, is a problem. Because why did the unions want workers' control? They wanted to control their own organization, their own vehicle, which was a social movement union that was opening society. It inspired all of us, irrespective of your cultural, racial background. The unions was a force of good. And when you referred to the unions, oh, it was a matter of pride. When I spoke to people overseas, they said, God, you guys are crazy. Your union, our unions are asleep. So maybe it's the middle class spread. The unions are getting old, you know, they were middle aged, etc. But maybe the teenage years are the vibrancy of that democracy.
The fire of teenagers.
Yeah, that we need to rekindle, because the union at that time was a movement. It was an organization, but part of a movement that inspired others. They called themselves at one stage social movement unionism, what we called. I was passionate about how worker poets, they would say, Kabula would be on a factory crane and thinking of a poem. And now as a person who's writing poetry, I can see that I'm doing something else. I say, God, this word inspires. But there was workers, Mitlatswayo, Nise Malange, others. These were the worker poets' culture. They were choirs for frame workers. They were like almost a competition amongst the workers. Leadership in many ways was broadened. It was not the elected leaders. Leadership was shared.
It came from the ground. Leadership came from the ground up.
But you were a leader because you were cultural, you were a poet. Because you, the Imbongi, you could speak some truths that the guys would be worried about you. There was a clear balance. In fact, sadly, when Alfred Kabula died, I went to the funeral with some friends, and Arisitas was there. Very few of us were there. But his last poems were quite sad. How he was like almost implying that he was sitting in an unemployed queue, and the comrades were in positions of influence actually walked him by. No, comrade, we'll phone you back, we'll phone you back. And he never kind of got that connection. So sadly, it's one phase, but it's a good memory that we have, you know, that it's important to rekindle it, because it happened in our lifetime, in your lifetime, you know.
Do you think that it could be rekindled, number one? And earlier on you spoke about unions being sponsored. That would then indicate that they could be captured, could they not? But of course, it's time for us to go for our first ad break. Please hold that thought. I'd like you you to respond thereafter. My guest is a social media activist, Hassen Lorgat. We are talking trade unions. We're going to be talking media and media capturing in South Africa and our role as ordinary citizens. Can we make a difference? Should we be making a difference? Please do stay with us and we'll give you all of those answers during the course of this interview. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I'm very pleased to announce that my guest on Perspective today is social justice activist Hassen Lorgat. We're talking about all things politics, and somewhere along the line we are also going to be talking about media and how media gets captured as well. Back to you, Hassen. We spoke about that just before the ad break. Can you elaborate more on that?
I think the unions obviously started gathering clout. They had membership. They paid for their own struggles, if you like. But what happened is that they formed investment companies. These investment companies sometimes, like in the case of ETV and others, the textile workers bought in there. The NUM, I think the investment companies got shares in Prime Media. So they did stuff in media, but generally the investment companies seem to be doing investment,
calling the shots,
getting in money, and then it seems that in some way that whether we like it or not, some commentators have suggested it fed into changing the nature of how the unions should be, where they stood with some leadership, how it can, so in some way the investment companies is something that must be seriously discussed.
Is there still a role for unions in South Africa?
There's always a role for dissenters, for justice, for a person like you or me to say, I've been treated wrong, I need assistance from my colleague or someone to make sure I'm fairly represented. You have a right, the union set these traditions inside labor law that anyone who accuses you has to give you in advance your charges, where you are, and you have the right to representation. We grew up, it almost became second nature before we had a democratic constitution. So the whole issue about building strong movements and organizations predates good law. We used the power of organization and camaraderie, no big money at that time, to build solidarities, that a value system that we wanted. Now we've got good law but weak organizations all over. You don't find civics, you don't find, it's not only the unions that have gone into decline, everywhere. Our politicians, at the time of our democracy in '94, you could find Dalla Umar's phone number on the letterhead or whatever else. You could have access to leadership. You try and find your leaders now, it can take you 2 years trying to phone one person. Right?
Absolutely. Let me just fast track and talk about something that's really close to your heart, my heart, and I should imagine all people who believe in humanity. Let's look at the issue around trust, justice, and most importantly, Palestine. We're talking, you're a social justice media activist, and you in your work often link ethical journalism with justice for Palestine. Can you explain why telling the truth in media is part of this broader struggle?
I've used the word, and I don't know whether it was Edward Said who said it or who, but I always thought it was also mine, that Palestine is the litmus test of our humanity. When someone is getting so beat up, right, so surveyed, I mean, people's homes, they stopped every checkpoint, the dehumanization. I mean, it did not happen only now the last 2 years of this genocide. It was a slow, incremental torture, marginalization of a community. People who fought for the rights to be free and to determine their destiny. So in many ways, it's said we don't want Palestinians to die so that we become better humans. Palestinians cannot die, and that's the reason why we make these interventions. But Palestinians will die if we allow local groups in our country where we are. It's far away. We are mediating this solidarity through internet and friendship, sometimes a phone call. But the true connection is Zionism is embedded in all societies, and that our challenge here is to how do we engage those who are not solidaristic towards the cause of Palestinians. As we speak now, over 60,000 people known to be dead, very conservative figure, over Lancet.
Palestinians, obviously.
Palestinians killed by Israel, the defense force. But the Lancet, a reputable medical journal, said that this is an underestimate. There are hundreds and thousands of people lying under rubble. In fact, there's some article I read where the dogs are getting fed and the people are thin. Because you can imagine what that is. And journalists, close to 300 journalists being killed, more than many of the other wars put together. So this year, the question for us is, Israel is enabled by local Zionist groups. And we need to challenge that to make sure they see the light of our government. In fact, for me, the lamentation is that the media sets itself up as the fourth estate, a check on power. But power, if you like, as in the sense of the South African government, ANC-led, were more progressive than many journalists. When you pick up the phone here, oh, why are you talking about this? Oh, we've got our own problem. That is Hasbara putting the message in. Whereas we should be saying, we stand with those poor people.
And let me come in here now. You have very, very strong feelings regarding the South African Jewish Board of Deputies and their Hasbara, meaning obviously their conditioning, their brainwashing, or the type of propaganda they feed out to the rest of the world. What I find also very, very disconcerting is I had a discussion with Kevin Bloom, the Jewish journalist based in the Western Cape, and he pointed out to me that Jewish people all around the world, their total numbers is 15 million, whereas Muslim people around the world equate to almost 2 billion. What is so wrong in society today that 15 million people can dictate to 2 billion and more people their terms, their conditions, and their rules?
Yeah, I must say that the Jewish community, the Holocaust survivors, are amongst the strongest supporters for Palestinian rights. You must see and read about how they are harassed in Germany for standing up, saying never again. So Jewish students in New York, for example, went to the stock exchange, protesting there, saying that the people in the Senate and elsewhere bought into shares into the armaments, because this was led by Jewish students standing alongside Palestinians, and they regard it almost as protection. When we are there, we know that you won't be shot or beaten up as brutally as you would otherwise. So I don't think it is a small number. I think that the number of people who do this are Zionist ideologues. And really, Netanyahu, whom the people, I believe there was a massive protest the other day, close to 1 million in Israel, where they call him the crime minister. The crime minister has actually been trying to do this so that he can evade criminal prosecution, so he'll be in jail. So even inside there, in fact, I keep saying, Julie, that Haaretz, the Jewish newspaper, is the most progressive compared to South African media. I mean, so the point is it's more complex. It's not a numbers game, because we'll come to the issue of genocide, where and how some of our local newspapers have reported it. It's quite clear that the Jewish communities have been an inspiration, showing us how to fight totalitarianism, Nazism, all the genocides. And some of the ideologues are trying to deny what's happening to Palestinians is a Holocaust. But not all of them. Because the guy, Omer Batov, he's an eminent scholar on Israeli, but he's in the States, eminent scholar on genocide, said, first when I saw this, I thought when it's ethnic cleansing, small, yeah. He says in June last year, this is genocide. He says, I'm a scholar. He says in the New York Times and The Guardian, I'm a scholar of genocide. I know it when I see it. So the idea of trying to diminish what's happening to Palestinians, as happened in the Sunday Times this weekend by a woman, Siegel, from the Zionist Federation.
And talking about that, in your open letter, you said that neutrality in the face of genocide is siding with the oppressor. Why is moral clarity so important in this context?
Well, I was quoting Tutu. I was quoting Howard Zinn. Tutu says when there's an elephant, the elephant's foot is on the tail of a mouse, and say, hey, you must be neutral. He say, what does a poor mouse do? He has to scrounge out and find a way to fight. And Howard Zinn famously said, Howard Zinn he described himself as a Zionist, progressive Zionist in the early years. He basically said that you cannot be neutral in a moving train. My basic argument is, I know about hearing the other side, but I really say, should we have balance in the time of a genocide? When it is so overwhelming, it's in your face. It's the most recorded genocide in history. You pick up the phone. In fact, sometimes we don't want to watch because we're so weak, right? And then people still want to say that, no, the numbers are low. It's not a requirement under the Genocide Convention to have the numbers to be low. The numbers are not low, first of all, but it's not a requirement. You know, so in many, many ways, what's happening, denying that it's a genocide and the media underplaying the reporting. There's some of South African media do not even touch this topic. They don't touch it. I would like to see more coverage on ENCA, for example, on this. And we're going to talk about the Sunday Times and others and how they reported it. But clearly, this underreporting is a problem.
Okay, we've got another minute before we take another ad break. But let me ask you, you mentioned Edward Said a minute or two ago. Is he still alive?
No.
He passed away recently, am I right?
No, long ago, 2001, yeah. A while,
okay.
Yeah.
Also a journalist from Israel. And
he's a writer, intellectual, public intellectual. He's done amazing work to inspire thinking on that Palestinians are more than just what you see, you know, victims. Mm-hmm. They're intellectuals, they play the piano, they can sing, they can do different things.
They're as human as you and I.
Yeah.
Let's go for that ad break. I am talking with social justice activists, social media justice activists, and that, of course, is Harun Lorgat. Still more to uncover on the show. Please do stay with us. Hassen Lorgat is my guest. We're talking social justice. We're talking social justice in the media. He is a social activist, and let's get talking some more. Let's talk about your open letter to the Sunday Times. You talk about purpose, you talk about principles. Give us some context to that letter, and what sort of outcomes are you expecting? Did you get a reply?
Well, you know, basically 3 newspapers, The Citizen, the Sunday Times, and the media house BizNews, went to do stories during April and May. They went to what they say Israel, Palestine. They failed to tell their readers that this was a sponsored trip. And Sunday Times are correct. By the time I wrote to them, they had already apologized in a way that I think was not appropriate. It was so small, you needed a microscope or microphone, something to check what is it that they're saying. It was hidden away there. And so they did another apology. I still don't find it properly. They didn't apologize throughout the platforms. Citizen tried better, apologized, and I can tell you what they did. BizNews, a non-member of the press council, put it up front, but they didn't acknowledge that they were alerted. They make it look like this is just a natural omission and we got clever, you know. I think that the Sunday Times has to account. They are quite offended that I've said that they are on the wrong side of history. I think part of the problem is that they believe in this both-sidism. Last week they had Matata Tsedu talking about the Fuhrer in Gaza. This week you got someone saying, there's no genocide, etc., etc. I think, you know, that balance is not needed in the time of a genocide. We didn't need it in the time of the Holocaust. We didn't need it when a rapist rapes a person. You don't ask whether you save the victim, the survivor of rape. Give all the support. Sociologists can do, and anthropologists can start out later what's in the mind of those people. It's not this time. What we need now is to call for a ceasefire, to make sure that Palestinians have the right to a dignified life. They determine their own destiny, not to have Netanyahu, you know, trying to take over Gaza City and all that. So all that is where they should be, not playing games on this issue. So when they apologized, first they were saying, I came late. I don't really have a problem with that. But I do point out to them in one of the interviews, Dr. Manjra had written to them on the 15th of May. He wrote to the editor. They ignored it. The editor at large who wrote the article. 23rd, he writes back to say, sorry, this was late. I'll come back to you. I called him on Sunday. No one has ever come back to him. So I see, and this is to the Sunday Times, they are a media house of record. I got 3 million odd readers. When they see something happens, right? If they're not on the side of the poor, and the wicked and the marginalized, whose side are they on? You know, they start saying, the editor called in one of the program hosted by Chris Vick. He said, what is this conspiracy Hassen talking about? You know, I don't know those people. You don't have to be told it's a conspiracy. The common factor is the South African Jewish Board of Deputies. They paid for your trip. They may have told you, please don't talk about it. You should say, hey, man, this is Article 101 of journalism. If I'm getting a sponsorship to say, this is sponsored by so-and-so, they don't need to be told that it's sponsored. They know they should say that. The conspiracy doesn't mean someone has to tell you in your ear. But let me tell you, at the same time, these guys were taken on this junket. Other politicians in the UK were taken on that junket. They met Herzog, the Israeli Prime Minister. Our politicians here, 10 of them, were also taken on the same junket. And you know, Julie, one of my concerns is, I can name them, I've got their names here, and I'll just point it out so I don't make mistakes. The sad issue is that we're having a discussion about how the media has been taken out of the game. Why is it that we haven't had discussions what happened to our politicians? They were from ACDP, DA, you know, Patriotic Alliance. Those guys were voted in there not to say, hey, go and use other people's money, go and do other things, go on the freebie. Glenys Breitenbach said that her delegation, about 4, the gift she recorded was 110,000. How much did these journalists get, right? You know, we are talking here, we see in video 60,000 counted for this other thing that Daily Maverick is doing, right? How is this different? There's money embedded in hotels, in eating well, flights, I don't know what is.
There's one word for it.
Yeah.
Captured.
That's it.
I want to just digress a bit, and as you were talking, what came to mind is South African stance, you know, having taken the genocidal Israelis, Netanyahu particularly and his ministers, to the ICC and the ICJ. However, I just came across a recent article where a Ugandan judge at the ICJ,
yeah,
has gone out in public, and I'm absolutely horrified, a woman of her stature, her education, her experience, saying that God has spoken to her and God has told her that Israel has a right to defend itself, something along those lines. You must have come across that.
Yeah.
Your thoughts?
I mean,
it's absolutely terrifying and horrifying.
Yeah. She's the one judge that at every point voted in favor with Israel and against South African government, the only one. And she says to her government, when her government asked her these things, she says it's a religious conviction. She's part of the Christian Zionism movement, and they start thinking that the Israelites mentioned in the Bible and the Quran, and that is the one of the state. In fact, these very guys, in fact, I think she has to remember, when Israel was looking for a homeland, they looked at Uganda, Kenya, they looked around, even in Latin America. I mean, we will revere Israel in Uganda now. You know, so clearly, this is a political project, not a religious project. When they were looking for a homeland, Balfour helped them. 48, they Deir Yassin killed Palestinians. It is true. They killed Palestinians, and one of the Israeli cabinet ministers, his name is Aaron Sisling. He basically, when he heard about this, says, now we too behave like Nazis, and my whole being is shaken. He said it then, very early. And today people are drawing comparisons to earlier totalitarian rulers.
Let's come back to this judge at the ICJ. A person of her caliber, the education that she's been through, sitting on an international body as the ICJ. How can we even reconcile the fact that she makes a statement such as that? I mean, really? God spoke to her and her religious beliefs, and prevents her from actually shutting Israel down, so to speak, or supporting the Palestinians.
Yeah, I mean, the commonalities of all the major religions is compassion. This is Karen Armstrong who says it, you know, that all of them being in the shoes of the other. If she can't see that, I think she's being blinded by something else. But as I was driving here through from my township, I on the radio, there were many callers were coming through saying, oh, these magistrates want extra money. How many of them are the cases get thrown out because they are bribed? So the question is that we're talking about an accountable democracy. We're talking about judges being bought at the high level and the magistrates bought at the low level. We're talking about journalists being bought. And when journalists are bought, they can't keep these other aspects, other parts of society accountable because they are in the pocket. How can the editor of the Citizen or the Sunday Times asks Emma Powell or Breitenbach about Israel-Palestine when they were more or less in the same boat going there? So you need to have that. So simply what we've been asking for is, first we wanted to have a conversation. I'm now saying with these other cases of corruption, allegations of it, right? Let us have an inquiry like Kathy Satchell had before into media ethics. 5 years ago, this was held just after COVID, they couldn't publish and that. It's time to have that. So we have an all-in conversation about the rights and wrongs, the warts and all about journalism.
What do you say regarding South African journalism? What would be the red line not to cross? What does that look like to you from both perspectives?
You mentioned Kevin Bloom, who writes now for Daily Maverick, whom I've fought against. And I must say, he's been a breath of fresh air in that paper. So in many ways, that Chomsky and Herman wrote a book about the propaganda model of media. Right? There are 5 filters. One of them, if the journalist stands up to be principled, they'll give them flack, basically moor, right? Get a beating up in different ways, inducements, etc., but to take them out of the game. So some of these journalists who were good at a particular point actually you have to ask, why is it that they've gone bad, right? The papers are suffering, all that. But this should be the discussion of a media inquiry. So what we want is ethical journalism is not just checkbook journalism, right? You should go against your editors if they don't cover you, right, in a way that you want to be covered. If you want to speak the truth, I know a lot of journalists out there want to do it, but there are no journalist unions. In fact, Julie, you should belong to a union. All of you should have it. There are no unions. We've got an editors forum. Editors are highly compromised. They're the interface between money and editorial, right? And it's a problem.
Well, we've got the South African National Editors Forum, and I'm hoping and praying that they do live up to their name. But that being said, once again, let's go for a short break. When we come back, we'll be wrapping up. I want to look at civil society, people and power, and also a vision for media and justice. Definitely not enough time. Hassen Lorgat is my guest. He's a social justice activist. So much to unpack, and let's see how much more we can cram into the interview this morning. Hassen, you've worked with groups opposing exploitative mining and other injustices. How have those experiences shaped your perspective on media accountability? And we know the injustices regarding mining is a whole issue on its own. We can't go into it right now because of time constraints, but I'm hoping we can have that in a future discussion. But that accountability, media accountability on that group of people.
Julie, I said in another interview that I'm a habitual caller on some of these programs, because I work for causes that are quite marginal. Many of us, actually, we don't realize why a car guard may be from the DRC or an area where cobalt is found in 1 or 2 places in the world, Chile and there, where Amazon and others almost colonize these places so they can get this consistent supply of critical raw materials. Generally mining is a water wasting, it's a waste producing factory, right? In fact, they throw away a lot more rubbish to get the small diamond, whatever it is. So that's the way we should look at it. And then I'm now working around mine waste and tailings dams. And I keep saying that the tailings dam, these are all the muck of the mines, right? It's an accident waiting to happen.
The sludge.
Yeah, it's waiting to happen. Jagersfontein will be celebrating or commemorating a 3rd anniversary on the 11th of September. We just spoke with the Gift of the Givers. We're going to be going there to try and highlight how this community is coped. Because first it was COVID, then it was the disaster. and they live with dirty water, homes are not what it was, but neglected. They're far away in the south of Free State. But so the point is, mining companies externalize their costs. They push it onto people. People suffer with asthma, cancers, etc., etc. So what we need to look at, when you look at this beautiful phone, we must say, what is inside here? Who has died for it? Why is it that should we need a new phone every 6 months or 1 year? You know, it's this kind of thinking that citizens must have, that how much of our water is being corrupted? What's happened to the regulatory bodies? Why are they so weak? You know, why is it that the government doesn't have a complaints mechanism, grievance mechanism inside there, so that workers and mining communities outside, rather, workers have more rights than communities, can actually access these? So it's a big story, as you say, but the big one we must think about, what's happening to our water supplies. We are a semi-arid nation in climate change. When this heat comes up, every time you see there's a disaster, as happened in Jagersfontein, excessive rains, it bursts, right? It happened the same thing in KZN, Zululand anthracite colliery. So the point is, it affects animal life, human life, jobs, livelihoods, you know. And the bosses only woke up after people died in Brumadinho, right? 272 people got killed, you know. Then everyone started talking about standards and that. Ultimately, as with media activists, we need to organize ourselves so that we can be there for the long haul. These things are permanent institutions, permanent structures. We need permanent organizations and movements to be vigilant. But we need governments on our side. We need groups like SANEF on our side. Although I must point out that the current chair of SANEF is also the editor of the Sunday Times. So we're not making them the enemy. We want them to come home.
But how can they be unbiased?
Well,
if he has those, you know, wearing the two hats. And I ask that question with due respect.
Yeah. Let me say to you, you're asking with community activists. There's a woman activist working on hardwares against Zionism and that in KZN area. So she wrote, on the basis of all this happening, she says, hey, I hear your guys have been going on trips, etc. So she writes to the editor of the Sunday Times. Not because of me. It's her initiative. So the editor replies to her. She says, I want a full statement. What will you do? Wah, wah, wah. And she's quite strong. So the editor writes, the citizen will no longer send anyone on sponsored trips to Israel. This is because these trips, being stage managed and carefully curated, deliberately only portray one side of the story. It is not possible to cover the other side because these trips journalists are restricted in where they can go and who they can talk to. No professional journalistic job can be done on such trips. So I say to the Sunday Times, this is the citizen. These are the guys from the info scandal in that, right?
And your direct opposition.
Right, but look what they've done. And they're also on the junket. And they have picked up the way. In fact, what the editor says to this lady, he says, this is our statement. I would like to take it up with our full staff meeting to explain the decision as well as to make sure there are no doubts. So we're asking this kind of thing for them. But when we ask for this is the Indaba before this Indaba, we must have a media Indaba. And you must be there, Julie. You know,
Inshallah. All right. You've called for a full ethics inquiry to prevent further misuse of media. And we know that by and large, a large group of media houses in South Africa have been captured. So what reforms would you like to see to strengthen truth-telling and fairness in South Africa? And I talk about media accountability not only in the case of Palestine, but generally across the board. Whatever the issue may be, wherever there is an issue of injustice, we need media to be accountable in reporting the facts of the matter, and also perhaps to give perspective to both sides of the story.
Yeah, Julie, you know, the weakness that we have now is that there's no journalist unions. You, even if you're part-time, you need to have rights protected as a mother, a woman, during this month and elsewhere. You need to know you can rely on someone to defend you. That is gone. This is when I spoke about the heyday of organizing. They don't exist. You know, the unions don't exist in many, many places. Unions almost got a bad name. When they talk about unions, they talk about union bosses, and I can't think this would have been possible. So that's the first thing. But us who read, consume media, engage media, must form our own association. Do what the lady in KZN did, or do what the doctor in Cape Town did. Write in. So let's get active groups to engage all media, even our local WhatsApp groups, where there's a lot of lies peddling about fake things, and because a fake thing tells you something about that is good about you or Muslims, you don't have to accept it. It's a fake. It's just all fake, because it's a gateway for other fakes.
Let's stick with social media. Yeah. And we've been talking media and media accountability and captured media. But let's look at the role of social media. Are they a threat to large media houses? And how concerned should we be about, you've just mentioned fake news on social media, and it can go viral overnight. Is there accountability for those type of groupings of people? Because you are talking media accountability here. How do we control those narratives which could be very falsely misconstrued and put out and cause more damage?
Yeah, I think it's an important challenge that you're putting. But I think the service providers have a great responsibility to act as moderators to make sure that they control good values from bad. But what's happened? You find now X has opened up. Everyone is now, they put whatever they want because they believe lies and fake news and clickbaits, all that help to grow their money. So in many ways, the mainstream have a dominant social media presence. They're not out of it. You can get Guardian on X, and they have everything, and they're outgunning poorer people. What is important about traditional media or mainstream is that they tell us they will fact check. They tell us they are self-governed. We will look after this because we have a code, a press code. And then when they break the press code as basic as this, there must be other reasons. Must be money or other inducements. So the code has got that, but the enforcement must be strong. I'm unhappy with our beloved Press Council for seeing these as individual problems. This is Julie's problem, this is Hassan's problem. No, we as an organizer, we've got to see the pattern. 3 houses interviewed the same people, similar people. They only rebuttal to them, to the grievance of Israelis, was one Palestinian, Dr. Saidan, sitting in Ramallah or somewhere, not victims in Gaza. So in many ways, we want them to pick up this. If there's a conspiracy among media houses to defraud the public's right to know, they diminish the politics, our democracy. They diminish our right to keep politicians accountable. And that long list of people, politicians who went there on a trip, are having an easy ride. The media has to wake up, say sorry, and then keep those guys accountable.
Okay, Hassan, apart from captured media, lots of media houses, our media house, for example, we want to keep the Muslim identity alive, and this is a medium for non-Muslims to see who we are, what contribution we make, etc. And there are quite a number of Muslim media houses as well. And in our situation, we can't say we captured because we do have a specific agenda to tell the truth and get the Muslim view out there. So I'd like to think, don't fall under the issue, we don't fall under the captured group. But I do see we've just got about 1.5 minutes to wrap up. Very quickly, what do you have to say about that? And then, is there hope regarding media in South Africa and for them to be accountable and speak the truth?
Julie, there must be hope, because I drove 50 kilometers to this place, right? Because I think it's important. But I think as Muslim media, we also have to ask tough questions. Why is the global ummah letting this happen? Where's the frontline states around Palestine to make sure, like we had the frontline states in South Africa blocking South Africa from doing things. So we need to ask questions. The holy places that are close to Palestine, the holy places within Palestine, what is the ummah? Why is a failure to speak with one voice? Your media house here is the right one to ask those questions, because the ummah is powerful in numbers, but if they're qualitatively powerful, we will have peace there.
And that's where we have to leave it. Hassen Lorgat, what a pleasure. I think I needed the entire day to sit and engage with you, but hopefully we'll have you on next time and let's talk about the mining issue. That's it from us on Perspective today. My esteemed guest, Hassen Lorgat, a person who believes in truth and justice. He's a social activist, and why are there not more Hassen Lorgats in the world? We need more such voices to speak truth to power. From me, Julie Ali, till the next time, as always, thank you for watching, and Khuda Hafiz.